Imagine this, you're 7 months pregnant, living in a luxurious mansion with your millionaire husband and adorable daughter, thinking life couldn't be more perfect. Then, in one shattering moment, you overhear a phone call that exposes the ultimate betrayal: your husband cheating with your best friend of 20 years, plotting to abandon you right after the baby arrives. Heartbreak, lies, gaslighting, and a desperate fight for your children ensue, uncovering a predator's dark history of destroying families. Will Sarah rise from the ashes, expose the truth, and reclaim her life? Or will the twist pull her deeper into danger? This gripping tale of revenge, empowerment, and shocking secrets will keep you hooked till the end. Stay tuned for the full story. If you're already on the edge of your seat, smash that like button, drop a comment below with what you'd do in Sarah's shoes, share this with your drama-loving friends, and hit subscribe so you never miss another epic review. Let's dive in. Sarah Michelle Chen Davidson sat in the pristine marble bathroom of her $3 million mansion, staring at the pregnancy test in her trembling hands. Two pink lines, 7 months pregnant with their second child, and she should have been overjoyed. Instead, a cold dread settled in her stomach like a stone. The house was too quiet. Emma, their 8-year-old daughter, was at her piano lesson, and Michael should have been in his home office working on his latest tech venture. But something felt wrong. It had felt wrong for months now. Sarah stood slowly, her hand instinctively moving to her rounded belly. At 38, she had given up her promising career as a marketing executive to support Michael's startup dreams 12 years ago. Now, as the wife of a millionaire, she should have felt secure. Instead, she felt more vulnerable than ever. The sound of Michael's voice drifted down the hallway from his office. He was on a phone call, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Something about his tone made Sarah pause, her bare feet silent on the cold marble floor as she moved closer to listen. "Becca, we can't keep doing this." Michael's voice carried through the slightly open door. "Sarah's pregnant again. I need time to figure this out." Sarah's heart stopped. Becca, Rebecca Sterling, her best friend since college, her sorority sister, the woman who had been her maid of honor, the woman who had been coming to dinner every Sunday for the past year, bringing gifts for Emma, cooing over Sarah's growing belly. "I know you're getting impatient," Michael continued, "but we have to be smart about this. Once the baby comes and she's dealing with postpartum depression like last time, we can make our move." The pregnancy test slipped from Sarah's nerveless fingers, clattering onto the marble floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silent hallway. Michael's voice stopped abruptly. Sarah stumbled backward, her mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. Not Michael, not Becca, not now, when she was 7 months pregnant and more dependent on them than ever. Her thoughts raced back to their recent couples therapy sessions. Dr. Martinez had noticed Michael's distance, his reluctance to engage. He had blamed work stress, the pressure of launching his new app. Sarah had believed him, had tried to be more understanding, more supportive. She remembered last week's dinner party, how Becca had lingered by Michael's side, touching his arm when she laughed, staying late to help clean up while Sarah, exhausted from pregnancy, had gone to bed early. How many signs had she missed? Sarah's legs gave out, and she collapsed against the bathroom door, sliding down until she sat on the cold floor. Slow-motion tears began to fall as the full reality hit her. Her husband of 12 years was having an affair with her best friend of 20 years. The two people she trusted most in the world had betrayed her in the cruelest possible way. Outside the panoramic windows, rain began to fall, matching the tears streaming down her face. She caught sight of her reflection in the broken picture frame from their wedding day that had fallen from the counter when the pregnancy test dropped. Her face was fractured in the cracked glass, a perfect metaphor for how her perfect life was shattering around her. Sarah forced herself to stand, to move, to think. She couldn't fall apart now. She had Emma to think about, and the baby growing inside her. She needed to know the truth, all of it. With shaking hand, She picked up the pregnancy test and the broken frame. As she bent down, something caught her eye near the bed, a small, golden earring. Her breath caught. She recognized it immediately. The same delicate hoops Becca had worn to dinner last week. The ones Sarah had complimented. Sarah had thought Becca looked different when she left that night, but she couldn't put her finger on what it was. Now she knew. One earring had been missing. The earring felt heavy in her palm, solid proof that her best friend had been in her marital bed. The pregnant wife betrayed by the two people who should have protected her most. Sarah looked at herself in the mirror above the sink. The woman staring back at her looked older than her 38 years, tired from carrying this pregnancy while trying to hold her family together. But there was something else in her eyes now, a spark of determination that hadn't been there before. She thought of all the books she had read during her first pregnancy with Emma. Elizabeth Gilbert's Eat, Pray, Love had been her favorite, the story of a woman who rebuilt her life after betrayal. Sarah had never imagined she would need that inspiration herself. Michael's voice had gone quiet in his office. Soon he would emerge, probably with some excuse about work calls and investor meetings. He would kiss her forehead and ask about her day, all while planning his future with her best friend. Sarah placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby's gentle movements. "I'm going to protect us," she whispered. "All of us." The rain outside grew heavier, drumming against the windows like a warning. Sarah tucked the earring into her pocket, next to the pregnancy test. Evidence. She was going to need a lot more evidence. As she walked back toward the bedroom, she heard Michael's office door open. His footsteps approached down the hallway, and she could hear him practicing his concerned husband voice. "Sarah, sweetheart, are you okay? I thought I heard something fall." Sarah took a deep breath and turned to face him, her hand instinctively moving to hide the slight bulge in her pocket where the earring rested. "I'm fine," she said, forcing a smile. "Just clumsy. You know how pregnancy brain is." Michael's smile seemed different now that she knew the truth. Too bright, too practiced. "Of course. Why don't you go rest? I'll start dinner before Emma gets home." "That sounds wonderful," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Actually, didn't Becca say she might stop by tonight? I should call her." She watched Michael's face carefully, looking for any sign of guilt or panic. There it was, just a slight tightening around his eyes, a brief hesitation before he answered. "Oh, did she? I think she mentioned she might be busy tonight. Some work thing." Another lie. Sarah nodded pleasantly. "I'll call her anyway. We've been best friends for 20 years. She always makes time for me." The irony of those words hung heavy in the air between them. Michael's smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered. "Of course. I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything." As Michael walked away, Sarah felt a strange sense of clarity wash over her. The perfect life she thought she had was built on lies, but now she could see clearly for the first time in months. The millionaire husband affair that had been happening right under her nose was about to be exposed, but not in the way Michael and Becca expected. Sarah Chen Davidson, the former marketing executive who had given up everything for love, was about to remember exactly who she used to be. And this time, she was fighting not just for herself, but for her children. The storm outside intensified, but Sarah no longer felt afraid. She felt powerful. The next morning, Sarah woke before dawn with a plan forming in her mind. Michael slept beside her, peaceful and unaware that his secret was out. How many mornings had he lain there planning his deception while she slept trustingly beside him? Sarah slipped out of bed carefully, padding silently to her old home office that had been converted into a storage room when she gave up her career. Buried beneath boxes of Emma's outgrown clothes and old marketing materials, she found her laptop. It took several tries to remember the password, her maiden name, and Michael's birthday. How naive that seemed now. As the computer booted up, Sarah's mind raced with memories. She had been good at her job, really good. She had built entire campaigns around understanding human psychology, predicting behavior, gathering intelligence on competitors. Those skills hadn't disappeared when she became a full-time wife and mother. They had just been dormant. Now, like Alicia Florrick in The Good Wife, Sarah began to methodically plan her investigation. She started with the basics: phone records, credit card statements, Michael's calendar. As the tech millionaire's wife, she had access to all the family accounts, something Michael had probably forgotten in his arrogance. The first thing she discovered made her stomach clench: hotel charges dating back 8 months, always on nights when Michael claimed he was working late or traveling for business. The Fairmont downtown, the Ritz-Carlton, even a weekend at the Four Seasons that coincided with a supposed business conference in Portland. But then Sarah dug deeper, going back through 2 years of statements, and her blood ran cold. The hotel charges went back much further, to her first pregnancy with Emma. Michael and Becca's affair hadn't started 8 months ago. It had been going on for years. Sarah's hands trembled as she printed the evidence, her mind reeling with the implications. Every moment of her pregnancy with Emma, every milestone, every sleepless night with a newborn, Michael had been betraying her. The heartbreaking family drama wasn't just about the present, it was about years of lies. A sound from upstairs made her freeze. Michael was awake. Sarah quickly shut down the laptop and shoved the printed statements into an old marketing folder, her heart pounding. "Sarah," Michael's voice called from upstairs. "Where are you, honey?" "Just looking for some of Emma's old books," Sarah called back, forcing her voice to sound normal. "I'll be right up." She climbed the stairs carrying a random picture book as cover and found Michael in the kitchen making coffee. He looked handsome in his expensive pajamas, every inch the successful tech entrepreneur. It made her sick. "You're up early," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Everything okay?" "Just pregnancy insomnia," Sarah replied. "The baby was very active last night." Michael nodded absently, already reaching for his phone. Even now, even in this moment that should have been intimate and connected, he was distracted. How had she not seen it before Emma bounded into the kitchen, her dark hair in tangles, chattering about her day at school? Sarah watched Michael interact with their daughter, wondering if any of his affection was real, or if Emma was just another part of the facade he was so desperate to maintain. "Daddy, is Aunt Becca coming for dinner again this Sunday?" Emma asked innocently. Sarah saw Michael's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "I don't think so, sweetheart. She's very busy with work lately." "But she always comes on Sunday," Emma protested. "She brings me those chocolate cookies I like." "Well, maybe she'll come next week," Sarah interjected smoothly. "Why don't you go get ready for school?" As Emma skipped away, Sarah caught Michael staring at her with an unreadable expression. Did he suspect that she knew, or was he just feeling guilty about lying to their daughter after Michael left for his office downtown? Claiming he had back-to-back investor meetings, Sarah immediately called her sister Jenny. As a divorce attorney, Jenny had seen every kind of betrayal imaginable. "I need to see you," Sarah said without preamble. "Can you come over? It's about Michael." Jenny arrived within an hour, her expression grim as Sarah laid out everything she had discovered: the hotel receipts, the timeline, the phone conversation she had overheard. "Oh, honey," Jenny said, spreading the evidence across Sarah's kitchen table. "This is bad, really bad, but it's also good in a legal sense. Financial infidelity, emotional cruelty, adultery, you have grounds for everything." "I keep thinking about Emma," Sarah said, her voice breaking slightly. "She loves Becca so much. Sunday dinners, holiday parties, birthday celebrations. Becca has been there for everything. How do I tell my daughter that Aunt Becca has been destroying our family from the inside?" Jenny's expression hardened. "You don't tell Emma anything yet. Right now, you gather evidence. You document everything. You prepare for war, because that's what this is going to be." As if summoned by their conversation, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Becca. "Can't wait for Sunday dinner. I have such exciting news to share." Sarah showed the message to Jenny, who raised an eyebrow. "What kind of news do you think she means?" A horrible thought occurred to Sarah. What if she's pregnant? What if that's why Michael seems so panicked about timing? The possibility hung in the air between them like a poison cloud. Sarah thought she might be sick. "We need a private investigator," Jenny said firmly. "Someone who can follow them, get photographs, record conversations. In cases like this, the cheating spouses usually get overconfident and sloppy." Sarah spent the rest of the day in a strange dual existence. On the surface, she was the perfect pregnant wife, preparing for Emma's return from school, planning dinner, responding to Michael's texts about his day. Underneath, she was strategizing like the marketing executive she used to be. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table like a happy family, Michael seemed more relaxed than he had in weeks. He told stories about his meetings, asked Emma about her math test, complimented Sarah on the salmon she had prepared. "You seem in a good mood tonight," Sarah observed carefully. Michael smiled, and for a moment he looked like the man she had fallen in love with 15 years ago. "I am. I think I'm finally getting clarity on some things that have been bothering me. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions to get what you really want." The words sent ice through Sarah's veins. She thought of Becca's text about exciting news, of Michael's phone conversation about making their move after the baby was born. After Emma went to bed, Sarah found herself alone with Michael in their bedroom. He was unusually attentive, helping her with her pregnancy pillow, asking if she needed anything for the night. The guilt was making him solicitous. Sarah realized. He was trying to assuage his conscience by being the perfect husband when it didn't matter. "Michael," Sarah said carefully, "do you ever think about our future, about what life will be like when both kids are older?" Michael's hand stilled on her shoulders. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you see us growing old together, grandchildren? Retirement? All of that?" There was a long pause before Michael answered. "Of course I do. Why would you ask that?" But Sarah heard the hesitation, the careful modulation in his voice. He was lying, just like he had been lying about everything else. That night, as Michael slept beside her, Sarah stared at the ceiling and planned her next moves. Tomorrow, she would hire the private investigator Jenny had recommended. She would start documenting every interaction, every suspicious behavior, every lie. But tonight, she allowed herself to grieve for the marriage she thought she had, for the best friend she thought she knew, for the security and trust that had been stripped away while she carried Michael's child. The midlife betrayal story was just beginning, but Sarah was no longer the naive victim she had been yesterday. She was a woman who had been underestimated by her cheating husband and treacherous best friend. They had no idea what they had awakened. Sunday dinner arrived with the weight of a funeral. Sarah had spent the week gathering evidence, working with the private investigator Jenny had recommended, and steeling herself for what she knew was coming. Becca's exciting news was about to destroy what was left of their family's facade. Sarah prepared Michael's favorite meal, herb-crusted rack of lamb, roasted vegetables, and a chocolate tart that had taken her 3 hours to make. If this was going to be their last family dinner, she wanted it to be perfect in every way except the truth. Emma helped set the table, chattering excitedly about seeing Aunt Becca. "Do you think her news is that she got a new job? Or maybe she's getting married? She's been so happy lately." Sarah's heart clenched. Even an 8-year-old could see that Becca was glowing with some secret joy. "I don't know, sweetheart. We'll have to wait and see." Michael came downstairs looking freshly showered and nervous. He had been on edge all week, taking more phone calls in private, staying later at the office. The private investigator had confirmed what Sarah already knew. Michael and Becca were meeting almost daily now, usually at expensive hotels or at Becca's downtown apartment. When the doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock, Sarah felt her entire body tense. This was it, the moment when her carefully constructed world would finally collapse completely. Becca swept into their home like she always did, bearing gifts and wearing a smile that Sarah now recognized as predatory. She looked beautiful, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her designer dress flattering her slim figure, her skin practically glowing with happiness. "Sarah, darling." Becca embraced her, and Sarah had to fight every instinct not to pull away. You look wonderful. Pregnancy suits you so well. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Becca was complimenting the pregnancy while sleeping with the father of Sarah's unborn child. Thank you, Sarah managed. You look radiant yourself. Michael mentioned you might have some news to share. Sarah watched carefully as Becca and Michael exchanged a quick glance. There it was, the silent communication between lovers that Sarah had been too trusting to notice before. Dinner progressed with excruciating normalcy. Emma regaled them with stories from school while the three adults performed their well-rehearsed roles. Michael played the devoted husband, asking Sarah about her doctor's appointment and rubbing her shoulders when she mentioned back pain. Becca played the caring best friend, bringing up shared memories from college and asking about nursery preparations. It was only when Emma excused herself to the bathroom that the mask finally slipped. So, Sarah said, setting down her water glass with deliberate precision. What's this exciting news you wanted to share? Becca's smile became almost triumphant. Well, I wasn't sure when to bring this up, but I've been thinking a lot about my future lately, about what I really want from life. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair, shooting Becca a warning look that Sarah caught. And what do you want from life, Becca? Sarah asked softly. I want to be honest, Becca said, her voice taking on a practiced tone that Sarah recognized from her days in marketing. It was the voice of someone delivering a rehearsed presentation. I want to stop living a lie and start building something real with someone I truly love. The words hung in the air like a blade. Sarah felt time slow down as she processed what she was hearing. Becca was actually going to confess, right here at their dinner table, in front of Emma. That sounds wonderful, Sarah said, her voice remarkably steady. Anyone I know, Becca looked directly at Michael, who had gone pale. Actually, yes, Sarah. I need to tell you something that's going to be difficult to hear, but I think you deserve the truth. This was it. It was the moment Sarah had been dreading and preparing for all week, but instead of falling apart, she felt a strange calm descend over her. The truth, Sarah repeated. What truth would that be? Michael and I have fallen in love, Becca said, reaching across the table to take Michael's hand. We've been fighting it for months, but we can't deny our feelings anymore. We want to be together. Sarah looked at their joined hands, then up at their faces. Michael looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor, but Becca looked almost defiant, as if she was proud of what they had done. Months, Sarah asked quietly. Just months. Michael finally found his voice. Sarah, I know this is shocking, but actually, Sarah interrupted, her voice growing stronger. It's not shocking at all. I've known about your affair for a week now. The silence that followed was deafening. Becca's hand tightened on Michael's as they stared at Sarah in disbelief. You've known, Michael stammered. Sarah nodded, feeling a surge of power she hadn't experienced in years. I know about the hotels, the Fairmont, the Ritz-Carlton, that romantic weekend at the Four Seasons while I was here with morning sickness. I know about the phone calls, the secret meetings, the lies about working late. Becca's face had drained of color. Sarah, you have to understand. I understand perfectly, Sarah said, standing up slowly, one hand on her pregnant belly. I understand that my husband has been cheating on me with my best friend. I understand that you've both been lying to me for months while I trusted you completely. What I don't understand is how you could sit at my dinner table, eat my food, and plan to destroy my family while I'm carrying his child. It's not like that, Michael said desperately. Sarah, you have to listen. No, Sarah said firmly. You listen. Both of you. Emma is upstairs in this house. My daughter, who loves and trusts both of you, is going to come down any minute expecting to finish a nice family dinner. So you're going to sit there and act normal until she goes to bed, and then you're going to get out of my house. But Emma chose that moment to return from the bathroom, her face bright with curiosity. What's wrong? She asked, sensing the tension immediately. Why does everyone look sad? Sarah felt her composure crack slightly as she looked at her daughter's innocent face. How could she explain that the two adults Emma loved most after her parents had betrayed their entire family? "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart," Sarah managed. "We were just discussing some grown-up things." But Emma was too perceptive, too sensitive to the undercurrents in the room. "Mommy, are you crying?" Sarah realized with horror that tears were streaming down her face. The pregnancy hormones, the stress, the sheer emotional exhaustion of maintaining her composure. It was all catching up to her. "I think I need to lie down," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "I'm not feeling well." As Sarah started toward the stairs, she heard Becca say to Emma, "Don't worry, sweetie. Your mommy's just having a hard time right now. Sometimes when women are pregnant, they get very emotional and confused." Sarah turned back, fury blazing in her eyes. "Confused? Did you just tell my daughter that I'm confused?" "Sarah, please," Michael said, standing up. "You're upset, and that's understandable, but what?" Sarah demanded. "But I should be grateful that you've been planning to abandon me and our unborn child. But I should thank Becca for being such a devoted friend while she's been sleeping with my husband." Emma's eyes went wide with shock and confusion. "What does that mean? Why are you saying mean things about Aunt Becca?" The sight of her daughter's distress was the final straw. Sarah felt her knees give out, and she collapsed into the nearest chair, sobbing uncontrollably. The careful composure she had maintained all week shattered like glass. Michael rushed to her side, playing the concerned husband for Emma's benefit, but Sarah flinched away from his touch. "Don't!" she gasped. "Don't touch me!" Through her tears, Sarah could see Emma crying now too, frightened by the adult drama she couldn't understand. Becca was trying to comfort the little girl, and the sight made Sarah feel physically ill. "Take Emma upstairs," Sarah managed to say to Michael. "Now!" After Michael carried their confused and crying daughter upstairs, Sarah found herself alone with Becca in the dining room. The remains of their perfect dinner sat forgotten on the table, a mockery of the family harmony they had all pretended to share. "Sarah," Becca said softly, "I know you hate me right now, but you have to understand." "I have to understand what?" Sarah looked up, her face streaked with tears. "That you decided my husband was more attractive than our 20-year friendship, that you've been lying to my face for months while I trusted you with my deepest fears and insecurities." Becca sat down across from her, and for a moment she looked like the college friend Sarah had once loved. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. We fought it, Sarah. We really did." "When did it start?" Sarah asked. "And don't lie to me anymore. I have credit card records going back 2 years. Becca's face crumpled. "It started when you were pregnant with Emma. Michael was feeling overwhelmed with the business and the new baby, and I was going through my divorce from Richard. We were both vulnerable, and one night we just—" "You've been destroying my marriage for 8 years, Sarah said, the words coming out flat and emotionless. 8 years of lies. 8 years of pretending to be my friend while you were stealing my husband." "It wasn't like that in the beginning," Becca protested. "It was just once, and we both felt terrible about it. We agreed never to let it happen again." "But it did happen again." "Not for years," Becca said. "Not until last year, when Michael started having doubts about your marriage anyway. He said you two had grown apart, that you didn't understand his ambitions anymore." Sarah laughed bitterly. "Of course he did. And you were there to comfort him, weren't you? To understand him in ways his pregnant wife couldn't." "Sarah, please. I never meant for you to get hurt." Sarah stood up slowly, feeling every day of her 38 years, every pound of her pregnancy, every moment of the betrayal that had been eating away at her marriage like cancer. "You need to leave," she said quietly. "You need to leave my house right now, and you need to never come back." "What about Michael?" Becca asked. "What about Emma? She loves me, Sarah. I can't just disappear from her life." "You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy her family," Sarah replied. "Michael can make his own choices, but Emma is my daughter, and I won't have her confused by your presence in our lives anymore." As Becca gathered her purse and coat, she turned back one last time. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I really am. But I love him, and he loves me. That has to count for something." Sarah looked at the woman who had been her maid of honor, her confidant, her chosen sister for 20 years. "No," she said simply. "It doesn't count for anything at all." After Becca left, Sarah sat alone in her destroyed dining room, surrounded by the debris of the life she had built. Upstairs, she could hear Michael trying to comfort Emma, explaining away the adult drama with vague platitudes about mommy being tired. The heartbreaking family drama had reached its breaking point, but Sarah knew this was only the beginning. The legal battles, the custody issues, the financial entanglements, all of that was still to come. But for now, she just sat in the quiet house and mourned for the trust that had died at her dinner table, along with the friendship that had sustained her for 2 decades and the marriage that had defined her adult life. The pregnant wife betrayed had finally faced the truth, and the truth was more devastating than she had ever imagined. The days following the confrontation passed in a blur of hushed phone calls and careful choreography. Michael moved out of their bedroom and into the guest suite, claiming he needed space to think. Sarah knew better. He needed privacy to coordinate with Becca and his lawyers, because of course Michael had lawyers. As Sarah discovered when Jenny helped her start gathering financial documents, Michael had been meeting with Kellerman, Brady and Associates, the most expensive divorce firm in the city, for months. The financial infidelity went far deeper than hotels and gifts. Michael had been systematically protecting his assets, moving money into accounts Sarah didn't even know existed. "Look at this," Jenny said, spreading documents across Sarah's kitchen table. "He's been paying legal fees since last December. This wasn't a spontaneous affair that got out of hand. Sarah, this was a calculated plan to replace you." Sarah stared at the papers, feeling sick. December. She had been 5 months pregnant, glowing with happiness about their growing family, planning the nursery and picking out names. Michael had been planning her destruction. "The house is safe for now," Jenny continued. "It's in both your names, and with you being pregnant, no judge is going to force you out immediately." "But Sarah, we need to talk about what comes next." "What do you mean?" Jenny's expression was grim. "Michael's not going to make this easy. He's going to paint you as an unfit mother. The emotional breakdown at dinner, the pregnancy hormones, the fact that you haven't worked in years. He's going to use all of it against you." As if summoned by their conversation, Sarah's phone rang. Dr. Williams, her obstetrician. "Mrs. Davidson, I need you to come in for an appointment as soon as possible. Your husband called with some concerns about your emotional state and its impact on the pregnancy." Sarah's blood ran cold. "My husband called you. He mentioned that you've been having severe mood swings, possible signs of prenatal depression. Given your history with postpartum depression after your first pregnancy, I think we should discuss some options." Sarah looked at Jenny, who was listening with growing anger. "Doctor, I'm feeling fine. I haven't been having mood swings." "Well, your husband seemed quite concerned. He mentioned an incident at dinner where you became hysterical in front of your daughter." "Mrs. Davidson, untreated prenatal depression can be very serious. I'd like to discuss medication options and possibly a referral to a psychiatrist." After Sarah hung up, Jenny was pacing the kitchen like a caged tiger. "This is what I was afraid of. He's building a case that you're mentally unstable. The prenatal depression angle gives him grounds to claim you're an unfit mother." "But I'm not depressed," Sarah protested. "I'm devastated because my husband is cheating on me with my best friend. That's not mental illness. That's a rational response to betrayal. I know that, and you know that. But if Michael can get a doctor to put you on psychiatric medication, if he can document episodes of instability, he can use that in family court." Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. This was worse than just infidelity. This was psychological warfare designed to make her question her own sanity. That afternoon, Emma came home from school with a carefully neutral expression that broke Sarah's heart. Her daughter was 8 years old and already learning to navigate the emotional minefield her home had become. "Mommy," Emma said carefully, "Daddy said you might need to go to the doctor because you're sick." "Are you sick?" Sarah knelt down to Emma's level, choosing her words carefully. "No, sweetheart, I'm not sick. Sometimes when grown-ups have problems, they disagree about things. Daddy and I are disagreeing about whether I need to see a doctor." "Is it because you were crying at dinner?" Sarah's heart ached. How much had Emma understood of that horrible scene? "I was crying because I was sad about some grown-up things. But that doesn't mean I'm sick." Emma nodded solemnly, then asked the question Sarah had been dreading. "Is Aunt Becca coming to dinner next Sunday?" "No, honey, Aunt Becca won't be coming to dinner anymore." "Why not? Did you have a fight?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Yes, we had a fight. Sometimes when people do things that hurt each other very badly, the friendship can't continue." "What did she do that hurt you?" How do you explain adult betrayal to a child? How do you preserve innocence while preparing them for the reality that people they love can devastate them? "She broke a promise to me," Sarah said finally. "A very important promise about being loyal to our family." Emma seemed to accept this explanation, but Sarah could see the confusion and worry in her daughter's eyes. The collateral damage of Michael and Becca's selfishness was already spreading to the most innocent victim of all. That evening, Michael returned from work with an expression Sarah recognized from his business dealings, the look of someone who believed they held all the cards. "I made an appointment for you with Dr. Rodriguez tomorrow morning," he announced. "She's a psychiatrist who specializes in prenatal mental health. I think it would be good for you to have someone to talk to about the stress you've been under." "I don't need a psychiatrist, Michael. I need a husband who hasn't been lying to me for years." Michael's jaw tightened. "Sarah, I know you're angry, but you have to think about the baby. The stress you're putting yourself under isn't healthy. Dr. Williams is concerned about your blood pressure. And after what happened at dinner on Sunday..." "What happened at dinner was that I found out my husband and best friend have been betraying me. My reaction was completely normal." "Getting hysterical in front of Emma wasn't normal," Michael said coldly. "Accusing me of things, making wild accusations about Becca. That's not the rational behavior of someone who's thinking clearly." Sarah stared at him, recognizing the gaslighting tactics for what they were. This was the man she had loved and trusted for 12 years, systematically trying to make her question her own perception of reality. "I have hotel receipts, Michael, credit card statements. I have evidence of every lie you've told me for the past 2 years." Michael's expression didn't change. "Evidence of what business travel client dinners, Sarah. You're seeing conspiracies where there aren't any because you're not in the right headspace to think clearly." The casual dismissal of her pain, the confident way he twisted the truth, it was masterful and terrifying. Sarah could see how easily someone less prepared might start to doubt themselves. "I'm not going to see Dr. Rodriguez," Sarah said firmly. "Then I'll have to tell Dr. Williams that you're refusing treatment for your prenatal depression. That kind of decision could affect custody arrangements if something happens to our marriage." There it was, the threat barely disguised as concern. Sarah felt a chill run through her as she realized the full scope of Michael's planning. He wasn't just leaving her, he was trying to take Emma too. "Are you threatening me?" Sarah asked quietly. "I'm trying to help you," Michael replied. "But if you won't help yourself, then I have to think about what's best for Emma and the baby." That night, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling of her empty bedroom, Michael's words echoing in her mind. She thought about the private investigators' photos of Michael and Becca kissing outside expensive restaurants, the financial records showing systematic deception, the timeline that proved years of betrayal. But she also thought about how easily Michael had dismissed all of it, how confidently he had reframed her justified anger as mental instability. What if she hadn't been prepared? What if she hadn't gathered evidence? How many women had been gaslit into accepting blame for their husband's infidelity? The next morning, Sarah called Dr. Rodriguez's office and scheduled the appointment. but she also called Jenny and asked her to accompany her as an advocate. "I'm going to go," she told her sister, "but I'm going prepared. I want a recording of everything that's said, and I want you there as a witness. If Michael wants to play psychological warfare, I'm going to make sure I have documentation of his tactics." Jenny smiled grimly. "That's the Sarah I know, the marketing executive who never walked into a meeting unprepared." "I'm not the broken housewife he thinks I am," Sarah said, feeling a surge of her old confidence. "He's about to find out that the woman he's been underestimating is the same one who helped build his first company from nothing." But as Sarah prepared for what felt like a battle for her sanity and her children, she couldn't shake the feeling that Michael's confidence came from knowing something she didn't. The way he had dismissed her evidence so casually, the certainty in his voice when he made his threats, it suggested he had cards left to play that she hadn't discovered yet. The pregnant wife betrayed was about to learn that the heartbreaking family drama was far more complicated than she had imagined, and that her fight for her children was just beginning. The private investigator's call came at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday, waking Sarah from the first decent sleep she'd had in weeks. "Mrs. Davidson, you need to see me immediately. I've found something about Rebecca Sterling that changes everything." By 8 a.m., Sarah was sitting in Marcus Chen's small downtown office, staring at a folder that contained photographs, financial records, and legal documents that painted a picture more disturbing than she had ever imagined. "Rebecca Sterling isn't her real name," Marcus said without preamble. "She's Rebecca Sterling Martinez Johnson Wellington. She's been married 4 times, always to wealthy men, always under slightly different identities." Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Inside were wedding photos of Becca with different men, divorce settlements showing substantial financial gains, and most shocking of all, police reports. The second husband, James Martinez, filed a restraining order. Marcus continued. He claimed she was systematically destroying his relationship with his children from his first marriage, turning them against their stepmother, isolating him from his family and friends. Sound familiar? Sarah thought of how Becca had gradually become more central to their family life over the past year, how she had encouraged Sarah to quit her book club and yoga classes because they were taking time away from family, how she had subtly criticized Sarah's sister Jenny as being too negative about marriage. The third husband, Robert Johnson, lost custody of his daughter after Rebecca convinced him that his ex-wife was an unfit mother. She encouraged him to file false reports about abuse and neglect. When the truth came out, he'd already lost his relationship with his daughter permanently. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. "She's done this before. The whole thing. Befriending the wife, seducing the husband, destroying the family. Gets worse," Marcus said grimly. "Check the last page." Sarah flipped to a photograph that made her blood freeze. Becca, looking 5 years younger, holding hands with a man Sarah didn't recognize. But in the background, barely visible, was a woman pushing a stroller. A pregnant woman. Eleanor Wellington was 7 months pregnant when Rebecca began her affair with Eleanor's husband, Charles. After the baby was born, Eleanor suffered severe postpartum depression. Rebecca used that to convince Charles that Eleanor was an unfit mother. Eleanor lost custody of her newborn daughter and her older son. Sarah's vision blurred with rage and horror. "Where is Eleanor now?" Marcus's expression was grave. "She committed suicide 3 years ago. Never got her children back." The room spun around Sarah as the full implications hit her. Becca wasn't just a woman who had fallen in love with the wrong man. She was a predator who systematically destroyed families for financial gain. And Sarah's family was her latest target. "There's more," Marcus said gently. "I've been monitoring her communications with your husband. They're planning something for after your baby is born." Becca has been researching postpartum depression, collecting information about how to document maternal unfitness. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her belly, protecting the life growing inside her. "They're going to try to take my baby. And Emma." I found text messages where Becca refers to Emma as my future stepdaughter. She's already planning to replace you as their mother. That afternoon, Sarah sat in her car outside Emma's school, trying to process everything she had learned. The woman she had trusted as a sister for 20 years was a professional family destroyer who had probably never felt a moment of genuine affection for Sarah or Emma. When Emma climbed into the car, chattering about her day, Sarah had to fight back tears. Her innocent daughter had no idea that the woman she called Aunt Becca had been planning to steal her life. "Mommy, you look sad again," Emma said, her 8-year-old intuition picking up on Sarah's emotional state. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm just thinking about some important decisions I need to make." "About Daddy and Aunt Becca," Sarah's breath caught. "What about Daddy and Aunt Becca?" Emma looked uncomfortable, the way children do when they know they're venturing into adult territory. "I saw them kissing in Daddy's office last week when I came home early from school. But Daddy said it was a secret game, and I shouldn't tell you because it would make you sad." The casual way Emma revealed this information, the fact that she had been carrying this burden for a week, that Michael had made their 8-year-old daughter complicit in his deception, filled Sarah with a fury so pure it was almost cleansing. "Emma," Sarah said carefully, "you did nothing wrong by telling me that. Adults should never ask children to keep secrets from their parents about important things. But Daddy said, Daddy was wrong to ask you to keep that secret. And if anyone ever asks you to keep secrets like that again, I want you to tell me immediately." "Okay." Emma nodded, looking relieved to finally share the burden she'd been carrying. That evening, Sarah waited until Emma was in bed before confronting Michael. She found him in his office, on the phone with someone, speaking in the hushed tones she now recognized as his conspiracy voice. "I need to call you back," he said when he saw her, hanging up quickly. "That was Becca, wasn't it?" Sarah asked, holding up her phone with the recording app already running. She had learned to document everything. "Sarah, we need to talk about your behavior lately. Dr. Rodriguez called me with some concerns." "Dr. Rodriguez can't discuss my medical information with you without my consent," Sarah interrupted. "Which I never gave. So either she's violating HIPAA laws, or you're lying about the phone call." Michael's confident expression faltered slightly. "You're being paranoid." "I know what Becca really is," Sarah said quietly. "I know about Eleanor Wellington. I know about James Martinez and the restraining order. I know about Robert Johnson and how he lost his daughter." The color drained from Michael's face. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, he looked genuinely afraid. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Rebecca Sterling Martinez Johnson Wellington," Sarah said, enunciating each name clearly. 4 marriages, 4 families destroyed, 3 suicide attempts by her victims' wives, and now she's working on my family. Michael sat down heavily in his chair, looking suddenly older. "Sarah, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. She seduced you, convinced you that I was the problem in our marriage, encouraged you to document my instability so you could take my children, just like she did with Charles Wellington and his wife Eleanor." Eleanor was genuinely unstable. Eleanor was 7 months pregnant when her husband started cheating on her with Rebecca. Just like me. Eleanor developed postpartum depression and lost her children. Just like Rebecca, and you are planning for me? Eleanor killed herself 3 years ago because she couldn't live without her babies. Michael's face had gone gray. "Becca didn't tell me about Eleanor." "Of course she didn't. She told you what she tells all of them, that the wives are crazy, that the children would be better off, that she's saving everyone from a terrible situation. How long did it take her to convince you that I was an unfit mother?" Michael. Michael buried his face in his hands. "She said you were holding me back, that you didn't support my ambitions, that Emma needed a stronger female role model, and it never occurred to you that a woman who would help destroy a child's relationship with her mother might not be the best role model." The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of Michael's complicity in Becca's schemes. "What are you going to do?" Michael asked finally. Sarah looked at the man she had once loved, seeing him clearly for the first time in years. He wasn't a master manipulator. He was Becca's victim too. chosen specifically because his wealth and status made him a valuable target, but that didn't excuse what he had done to their family. "I'm going to protect my children," Sarah said simply, "from both of you." The next morning, Sarah received a call that made her blood run cold. Her sister Jenny's voice was tight with controlled panic. "Sarah, you need to get to a computer right now. Check the Metro family blog. There's an article about you, and it's bad." Sarah's hands shook as she opened her laptop and navigated to the popular local lifestyle blog that covered society events and family drama. The headline made her nauseous: "Tech Millionaire's Pregnant Wife's Public Breakdown, Mental Health Crisis, or Desperate Attention Seeking." The article was accompanied by photos: Sarah crying at her doctor's office, Sarah arguing with Michael in their driveway, Sarah looking haggard and exhausted during a grocery store trip. The photos had been taken with a telephoto lens, making her look even more unstable and desperate than she had felt. The article, written under a pseudonym, painted Sarah as a woman whose mental health had deteriorated during her pregnancy, driving her to make wild accusations against her devoted husband and her loyal best friend. It suggested that her paranoid delusions were a cry for help, and that her family was struggling to get her the treatment she needed. But the worst part was the comments. Hundreds of local women, many of whom Sarah recognized from school events and neighborhood gatherings, discussing her mental state as if she were a character in a reality show. The consensus seemed to be that pregnancy had driven her over the edge, and that her poor husband was dealing with the situation as best he could. "Becca," Sarah whispered, understanding immediately. This was psychological warfare on a public scale, designed to destroy her reputation and credibility before any legal proceedings began. Sarah's phone rang. Dr. Williams, her obstetrician. "Mrs. Davidson, I've had several patients forward me an article about you. I think we need to discuss how this kind of public scrutiny might be affecting your pregnancy." Another call came in immediately after. Emma's school counselor, expressing concern about the family situation and its impact on Emma's emotional well-being. Then her neighbor, offering support but clearly fishing for gossip. Then a reporter from the local news station, asking for comment on the allegations of mental instability. Sarah turned off her phone and sat in her empty house, feeling the walls closing in around her. Becca had weaponized the entire community against her, turning her pregnancy and her justified emotional responses into evidence of her unfitness as a mother. The heartbreaking family drama had become a public spectacle, with Sarah cast as the unstable villain threatening the welfare of her own children. And somewhere in the city, Becca was probably celebrating the success of her campaign to destroy yet another family. But as Sarah sat in the ruins of her reputation, she realized something important. She finally understood the full scope of what she was fighting. This wasn't just about infidelity or divorce. This was about a predator who had made a career of destroying mothers and stealing their children. And unlike Eleanor Wellington, Sarah wasn't going to let Becca win. The call came from an unknown number at 7 in the morning. 3 days after the devastating blog post had turned Sarah into local social media pariah. "Mrs. Davidson, this is Margaret Chen. You don't know me, but we need to talk. I was married to Michael before you were." Sarah's first instinct was to hang up. Her world had been turned so completely upside down that she trusted no one, especially strangers calling with information about her husband's past. "I know you have no reason to trust me," Margaret continued quickly, "but I've been following what's happening to you. The blog post, the rumors about your mental health. I lived through the exact same thing 15 years ago. Rebecca Sterling destroyed my marriage to Michael, and now she's doing it to you." Sarah gripped the phone tighter. "Michael told me his first wife was unstable, that she had addiction issues and left him for another man." Margaret's bitter laugh came through the phone. "Of course he did." "That's the story Rebecca helped him create. Mrs. Davidson, I've been clean and sober for 12 years now, happily remarried with 2 children. But 15 years ago, Rebecca Sterling systematically destroyed my life, convinced Michael I was an unfit wife, and drove me to a breakdown that nearly killed me. 2 hours later, Sarah sat across from Margaret Chen in a small coffee shop outside the city, staring at a woman who looked like a glimpse into an alternate future. Margaret was in her mid-40s, professionally dressed, with kind eyes that held the wisdom of someone who had survived something terrible. "Let me guess," Margaret said, stirring her coffee. "Rebecca became your best friend first. She was there for every crisis, every celebration. She gradually convinced you that certain people in your life were toxic. Maybe your sister, your friends from work, anyone who might have seen through her manipulation." Sarah nodded, thinking of how Becca had slowly isolated her from her support network over the past year. Then she started having private conversations with Michael about your marriage, how you didn't appreciate him, how you were holding back his success, how he deserved better. She probably suggested couples therapy, positioning herself as the concerned friend who just wanted to help save your marriage. "She did suggest therapy," Sarah whispered. "She said she was worried about us growing apart." And the therapist probably noted that Michael seemed distant and disengaged, which Rebecca used as evidence that you were the problem in the relationship. Meanwhile, she was already sleeping with him, giving him the emotional support she convinced him you weren't providing. Sarah felt sick as the pattern became clear. "How long did it take with you?" 18 months from the time she targeted us until the day I signed the divorce papers," Margaret said. "I was so broken by the end that I actually believed I was the problem. I spent 3 years in therapy just learning to trust my own perceptions again." "What finally made you realize the truth?" Margaret's expression hardened. "I found out she had done it before, to at least 2 other couples. When I started investigating her past, I discovered she wasn't even the person she claimed to be. She was like a professional home wrecker, targeting successful men with something to gain." Sarah thought of the private investigator's files, the pattern of destroyed families that stretched back years. "Did you ever try to warn anyone?" "I tried to warn you," Margaret said quietly. 3 years ago, when I heard through mutual friends that Michael had remarried and his new wife was pregnant. I called your house twice, but Rebecca answered both times. She said you weren't taking calls from Michael's unstable ex-wife and that any further contact would be considered harassment. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Margaret had tried to warn her, and Becca had intercepted the calls. How many other warnings had been silenced? How many other women had tried to save her from Becca's manipulation? "There's something else," Margaret said, her voice gentle but urgent. "Rebecca's endgame isn't just to steal your husband. She wants to replace you completely, as wife, as mother, as the center of your family's life. She's done it before." Margaret pulled out her phone and showed Sarah a Facebook page. In the photos, Becca looked younger and was holding a baby while standing next to a man Sarah didn't recognize. "That's Eleanor Wellington's baby," Margaret explained. "After Eleanor lost custody and later died, Rebecca raised little Sophia as her own daughter. She legally adopted her after marrying Charles. Sophia calls her mommy now and doesn't even remember Eleanor." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "She stole a dead woman's baby." "Huh. She didn't kill Eleanor directly, but she orchestrated everything that led to Eleanor's death. And now she's planning to do the same thing to you." That afternoon, Sarah sat in her therapist's office, not the psychiatrist Michael had insisted on, but Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, a specialist in trauma recovery who Margaret had recommended. "What you're describing is a sophisticated form of psychological abuse called triangulation," Dr. Rodriguez explained. "The perpetrator inserts herself into a relationship, gradually repositioning herself as the solution to problems she's actually creating. It's extremely effective because the victims often don't realize they're being manipulated until it's too late." "How do I fight someone like that?" Sarah asked. "She's convinced everyone in my community that I'm mentally unstable. She's turned my own husband against me. She's positioned herself as Emma's concerned aunt figure while planning to replace me as her mother." "You fight her with truth and documentation," Dr. Rodriguez said. "But more importantly, you fight her by reclaiming your sense of self. Right now, you're operating from a position of defense, trying to prove you're not crazy, trying to justify your reactions to abuse. We need to get you back to a position of strength. Dr. Rodriguez pulled out a book that Sarah recognized immediately, Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. I know it seems cliché, the therapist said with a smile, but this book is about a woman who had to completely rebuild her identity after betrayal. You mentioned you read it during your first pregnancy. What did you take from it then? Sarah thought back to those early days of motherhood, when she had felt so lost in her new role as mother and wife. I remember thinking about how brave Elizabeth was to leave everything familiar and start over. But I also remember thinking I could never do something like that because I had responsibilities. And now I realize that protecting my children from people who would harm them is the most important responsibility I have. Dr. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. You mentioned you used to be a marketing executive. What skills from that career could help you in this situation? Sarah felt a spark of her old confidence returning. Strategy, research, understanding target audiences, building compelling narratives. She paused, a plan beginning to form. I was good at exposing competitors' weaknesses and positioning my clients as the superior choice. And how might those skills apply to your current situation? For the first time in weeks, Sarah smiled. Rebecca has been controlling the narrative about me, painting me as the unstable wife having a breakdown. But narratives can be changed if you have the right evidence and the right strategy. That evening, Sarah called Jenny and Margaret, proposing something that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. I want to find the other women, Sarah said. Eleanor's family, the wives of Rebecca's other victims, anyone who has information about her pattern of behavior. I want to build a case that shows exactly what she is and what she's been doing to families for years. That's a great idea for your divorce case, Jenny said. But Sarah, are you sure you're ready for that kind of battle? Going up against Rebecca publicly could get very ugly. It's already ugly, Sarah replied. She's made it ugly by involving my community, my daughter's school, my neighbors. If she wants to fight in public, then I'm going to give her a real fight. Margaret's voice was concerned but supportive. I'll help you however I can, but you need to understand, Rebecca's very good at playing the victim when she's cornered. She'll probably claim that you and I are unstable women ganging up on her because we're jealous of her relationship with Michael. Let her try, Sarah said, feeling more like her old self than she had in months. I used to build marketing campaigns that could destroy competitors' reputations. I think it's time to remember how that's done. As Sarah hung up the phone, she felt something she hadn't experienced since this nightmare began: hope. Not the false hope of thinking her marriage could be saved, but the real hope that comes from having a plan and the determination to execute it. The pregnant wife betrayed was evolving into something Rebecca Sterling had never faced before: a strategic opponent who understood exactly what she was fighting and refused to be destroyed quietly. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. Sarah's transformation from victim to strategist began at 5 a.m. the next morning when she sat down at her laptop with a cup of coffee and a legal pad filled with the names Margaret had provided. Eleanor Wellington's sister in Portland, James Martinez's daughter from his first marriage, Robert Johnson's brother who had witnessed Rebecca's manipulation firsthand. Within a week, Sarah had connected with 12 people whose lives had been touched by Rebecca's destructive pattern. The stories were heartbreakingly similar: a charming woman who inserted herself into families during vulnerable times, gradually positioning herself as the solution to problems she had created. But Sarah was also discovering the harsh financial reality of her situation. Michael had been more thorough than she had imagined in protecting his assets. Their joint checking account contained barely enough to cover household expenses. And when Sarah tried to access their savings, she discovered that Michael had moved most of their liquid assets into accounts she couldn't touch. He's following Rebecca's playbook, Margaret explained during one of their daily phone calls. She teaches them to create financial dependency. When I finally left Michael, I had no money, no credit cards in my own name, no job history for the past 3 years. I was completely at his mercy. But I thought the law protected wives in situations like this, Sarah said, staring at her laptop screen showing a checking account balance that wouldn't cover next month's mortgage. The law protects wives who can afford lawyers, Margaret replied grimly. Without independent resources, you're at a huge disadvantage. That's part of Rebecca's strategy. She makes sure her target's wives are financially helpless when the marriage implodes. Sarah thought of the credit cards that had been mysteriously canceled, the investment accounts that required both signatures, the comfortable life that had become a golden cage. She had been so focused on building a family that she had forgotten to protect her independence. That afternoon, Sarah swallowed her pride and called her former boss, David Chen, no relation to Margaret despite the shared surname. Sarah, I was just thinking about you the other day. David's warm voice came through the phone. How's the family? How's the pregnancy going? Sarah took a deep breath and decided on honesty. David, I'm calling because I need help. My marriage is ending. I have no independent income, and I need to find a way to support myself and my children. The silence on the other end lasted long enough that Sarah worried he had hung up. Sarah, David said finally, are you talking about divorce from Michael? I thought you two were the perfect couple. That's what I thought too, but sometimes perfect marriages are perfect lies. David's tone became businesslike but supportive. What kind of help do you need? References for job applications? A recommendation letter? Actually, I was hoping you might have some freelance work. Project management, marketing strategy, anything that would let me work from home while I'm pregnant and dealing with legal proceedings? I can do better than that, David said. We just lost a client to a bigger agency, and we're scrambling to replace the revenue. If you could take on some of the overflow work, managing smaller accounts, developing campaign strategies, I could pay you as an independent contractor. For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a surge of hope. David, that would be incredible, but I should warn you, my personal situation is becoming public, and it's not pretty. There might be negative publicity that could affect your business. Sarah, you helped me build this agency from nothing. You trained half my current staff before you left to start your family. Anyone who has a problem with your personal life can take their business elsewhere. That evening, Sarah sat in her home office for the first time in years, not as a desperate wife gathering evidence of betrayal, but as a professional woman building a strategy for survival. She had work to do, money coming in, and a plan that extended beyond just surviving Michael and Rebecca's manipulation. But her newfound confidence was tested the next morning when Emma came downstairs looking confused and upset. Mommy, why are kids at school saying mean things about you? Emma asked and climbing into Sarah's lap as she worked at the kitchen table. Sarah's heart sank. What kind of mean things, sweetheart? Jessica Morrison said her mom read on the internet that you're crazy and that daddy might have to take me away from you because you're not safe. The casual cruelty of adults discussing her family's private drama in front of their children made Sarah physically ill, but she forced herself to stay calm for Emma's sake. Emma, do you think I'm crazy or unsafe? Emma shook her head emphatically. No, you're the best mommy ever. But Jessica's mom said, Jessica's mom doesn't live in our house. She doesn't see how I take care of you every day, how I help with your homework, how I make sure you're safe and loved. The only opinions that matter about our family are the opinions of people who actually know us. Emma nodded, but Sarah could see the worry in her 8-year-old eyes. The public nature of their family's destruction was traumatizing her daughter in ways that would take years to heal. That afternoon, Sarah received a call from Marcus, her private investigator, with news that made her stomach drop. Mrs. Davidson, I need to meet with you immediately. Rebecca Sterling has hired her own investigator, and they're building a file on you. I've managed to get some information about what they're documenting, and it's not good. An hour later, Sarah sat in Marcus's office staring at photographs of herself that had been taken without her knowledge. Sarah crying in her car outside Emma's school. Sarah looking disheveled during a grocery run. Sarah meeting with Margaret Chen, with a caption suggesting she was collaborating with Michael's unstable ex-wife. They're building a case that you're having a mental breakdown, Marcus explained. The photos are being combined with statements from people who claim to have witnessed your erratic behavior in public. What statements? Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. Marcus pulled out a folder. Becca's been busy. She's collected statements from the cashier at your grocery store, who says you seemed agitated and confused during recent visits. From a mother at Emma's school who claims you made inappropriate comments about your marriage during a school event. From your neighbors who have concerns about arguing they've overheard from your house. Sarah realized with growing horror how thoroughly Rebecca had been documenting her reactions to the betrayal, gathering evidence that could be used to paint her as an unfit mother. There's something else, Marcus said grimly. I've been monitoring Michael's communications, and he's been meeting with family court judges. Not officially, these are social encounters, golf games, charity events, but he's been talking about his concerns for Emma's welfare with people who could influence custody decisions. That's not legal, is it? It's not ethical, but it's not technically illegal either. Judges are supposed to recuse themselves from cases where they have personal relationships with the parties. But that doesn't always happen. Sarah felt the walls closing in around her again. Every move she made was being watched and documented. Every emotion twisted into evidence against her fitness as a mother. What do I do? She asked. Marcus leaned forward intently. You stop reacting and start acting. Right now, you're playing defense, trying to prove you're not what they say you are. You need to go on offense and prove what they really are. That night, Sarah lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the baby moving restlessly inside her as if sensing her agitation. In 6 weeks, she would give birth to Michael's child while fighting him for custody of Emma. She had no money, a damaged reputation, and enemies who had been planning her destruction for years. But she also had something Rebecca Sterling had never faced before: the combined testimonies of her previous victims, the support of professionals who understood psychological abuse, and the determination of a mother who refused to let her children be stolen. Sarah reached for her phone and called Jenny. I'm ready to fight, she said when her sister answered. I want to file for divorce first, before they can make their move. I want to expose Rebecca's pattern of behavior in court. And I want to make sure that when this is over, no other family has to go through what we've been through. Are you sure? Jenny asked. Once we file, there's no going back. This becomes a public legal battle. Sarah thought of Emma's worried face, of the baby growing inside her, of Eleanor Wellington who had died rather than lose her children. I'm sure, she said. It's time to show them what a real fight looks like. The pregnant wife betrayed was about to become something much more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to protect. Sarah's labor began at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks before her planned confrontation in divorce court. She woke to contractions that were too strong and too regular to be false labor, and her first thought wasn't about the baby, it was about timing. Michael wasn't in the house. He had been staying at Becca's apartment more nights than not, claiming he needed space to think, but really just abandoning any pretense of caring about Sarah's well-being during the final weeks of her pregnancy. Sarah called Jenny first, then her doctor, then the car service she had arranged because she refused to depend on Michael for transportation to the hospital. Only after she was dressed and her hospital bag was packed did she call Michael. Are you sure it's real labor? He asked, and Sarah could hear Becca's voice in the background asking questions. The contractions are 4 minutes apart and have been consistent for 2 hours, Sarah replied, feeling strangely calm. I'm leaving for the hospital now. We'll meet you there, Michael said, and the casualness of we, the assumption that Becca would be present for the birth of Sarah's child, made Sarah's resolve even stronger. No, Sarah said firmly. Jenny is meeting me. You can come to the hospital, but Becca's not welcome in the delivery room or anywhere near me during labor. Sarah, be reasonable. Sarah hung up and turned off her phone. She had learned to trust her instincts over the past few months, and every instinct told her that this birth needed to happen on her terms, surrounded by people who actually cared about her well-being. 7 hours later, James Michael Davidson was born, a healthy 7-pound baby boy With his father's dark hair and Sarah's determined chin, Jenny was the first person to hold him after Sarah, and the first person to capture the moment with the hospital camera. "He's perfect," Jenny whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Look at those eyes, Sarah. He knows exactly who his mama is." Sarah held her son, feeling a fierce protective love that dwarfed everything else she had been feeling for months. This tiny person was hers to protect, hers to love, hers to raise with or without Michael's involvement. "I want to register him under my maiden name," Sarah told the hospital administrator. "James Chen Davidson." "Ma'am, the father's name on the birth certificate, the father can be listed as Michael Davidson, but I want the baby's legal last name to include my maiden name. It's allowed in this state." It was a small act of defiance, but it felt significant. James would carry part of Sarah's identity, her family's heritage, her independence. Michael and Becca arrived at the hospital 2 hours after James was born, showing up together as if they were the proud new parents instead of a cheating husband and his mistress. Sarah had expected to feel rage when she saw them, but instead she felt a cold, clear determination. "Congratulations," Becca said, hovering near the hospital bed where Sarah held James. "He's beautiful. May I hold him?" "No," Sarah replied without hesitation. "You may not." Becca's face flickered with surprise, then annoyance. She had probably expected Sarah to be vulnerable and compliant in the aftermath of childbirth, following the pattern she had observed with her previous victims. "Sarah, don't be silly," Michael said, reaching for the baby. "I want Becca to meet my son." "Your son will meet your girlfriend when I decide he's ready," Sarah replied, shifting James away from Michael's reach. "Right now, he needs to bond with his mother." Michael's expression darkened. "You can't keep my child away from me." "I'm not keeping him away from you. I'm keeping him away from her." Sarah looked directly at Becca. "You have no legal relationship to this child, no parental rights, and no business being in this room." "I think you're having some postpartum emotional issues," Becca said in a concerned voice that was clearly intended for the nurses to overhear. "It's completely normal to feel protective and irrational after giving birth." Sarah had been expecting this exact response. Becca was following the same script she had used with Eleanor Wellington, positioning the new mother's protective instincts as evidence of mental instability. "Actually, I'm feeling very clear-headed," Sarah replied calmly. "Clear-headed enough to know that a woman who makes a hobby of destroying families shouldn't be around newborn babies." The comment hit its target. Becca's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the calculating coldness underneath her concerned friend act. "I think you need to rest," Michael said, his voice taking on the patronizing tone Sarah had grown to hate. "We'll come back when you're feeling more like yourself." After they left, Sarah called Marcus, her private investigator. "I need you to document everything that just happened," she said. "Michael brought his girlfriend to the hospital to meet our hours-old baby, then suggested I was having mental health issues when I objected. I want it all in the divorce file." "Already on it," Marcus replied. "I had someone at the hospital taking photos and video. We have Michael and Becca arriving together, her attempting to hold the baby against your wishes, and their reaction when you refused. It's all documented." Sarah felt a grim satisfaction. Every move Michael and Becca made was now being recorded and analyzed, their manipulation tactics exposed for what they really were. But her satisfaction was short-lived. The next morning, a process server arrived at her hospital room. "Sarah Chen Davidson?" the woman asked. "Yes. You're being served with emergency custody papers. Your husband is requesting immediate temporary custody of both children due to concerns about your mental stability and fitness as a mother." Sarah's hands trembled as she read the legal documents. Michael was claiming that her postpartum psychosis made her a danger to both James and Emma, and he wanted the children removed from her care immediately. The papers cited her erratic behavior during pregnancy, her paranoid accusations against Michael and Becca, her inappropriate outbursts in public, and her concerning behavior at the hospital the previous day. "This is happening faster than we expected," Jenny said grimly when Sarah called her. Michael's not waiting for the divorce proceedings. He's trying to take the children now while you're physically vulnerable from giving birth. Can he do that? Can he take James when he's only a day old? He can try. We have a hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. Sarah, I need you to understand how serious this is. If the judge grants temporary custody, you could lose both children while the case works its way through the system. That night, Sarah lay in her hospital bed holding James, memorizing every detail of his tiny face. In the hallway, she could hear nurses discussing her case in hushed tones, their voices carrying just enough for her to catch fragments: mental health concerns, and emergency custody, and those poor children. Becca's campaign to destroy her reputation was working. Even the hospital staff seemed to believe that Sarah was an unstable mother who posed a danger to her newborn son. At 2 a.m., when the hospital was quiet and James was sleeping peacefully in her arms, Sarah made a decision that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. She called David Chen, her former boss who had offered her freelance work. "Sarah, is everything okay? Didn't you just have the baby? David, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Have you heard anything about my personal situation? Any gossip or rumors that might affect your business if you're associated with me?" There was a long pause before David answered. "I've heard some things. Blog posts, social media discussion. People are saying you're having some kind of breakdown." Sarah's heart sank, but David continued. "But Sarah, I've known you for 8 years. I watched you handle crisis after crisis for our clients, always with grace and intelligence. Whatever's happening in your personal life, I know who you really are, and I know that person wouldn't pose a danger to her own children." "Thank you," Sarah whispered, feeling tears of gratitude. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Sarah looked down at James, then made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. "Actually, yes. I need you to be a character witness in family court tomorrow. I need someone who can testify about my professional competence, my decision-making abilities, my character. Someone who isn't family and has no stake in the outcome." "Of course," David said without hesitation. "What time?" As Sarah hung up the phone, she realized something profound had shifted inside her. The woman who had been so afraid of public judgment, so concerned about maintaining appearances, so worried about inconveniencing others, that woman was gone. In her place was a mother who would do whatever it took to protect her children, even if it meant exposing her private pain to public scrutiny. The heartbreaking family drama was about to become a courtroom battle, and Sarah was finally ready to fight with everything she had. The family courtroom was smaller than Sarah had expected, with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look sickly and uncomfortable chairs that reminded her of a doctor's waiting room. But the stakes couldn't have been higher. Temporary custody of both her children hung in the balance. Sarah sat at the defendant's table with Jenny, watching Michael and his expensive legal team arrange their documents with practiced efficiency. Becca wasn't in the courtroom. She had no legal standing in the proceedings. But Sarah could feel her influence in every carefully crafted argument Michael's lawyers presented. Judge Patricia Hendricks called the hearing to order, and Sarah felt her stomach clench as she saw the woman who would decide her children's fate. Judge Hendricks was known for her conservative views on family values and her tough stance on mothers she deemed unfit. Sarah couldn't help wondering if this was one of the judges Michael had played golf with over the past few months. Michael's lawyer, Robert Kellerman, rose to present their case with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. "Your Honor, we're here today because of serious concerns about Mrs. Davidson's mental health and its impact on her ability to care for her newborn son and 8-year-old daughter. During the past several months, Mrs. Davidson has exhibited increasingly erratic behavior, including paranoid accusations against her husband and close family friend, public emotional outbursts, and most recently, concerning behavior at the hospital following the birth of her son." Kellerman presented the evidence methodically. The blog post about Sarah's alleged breakdown, photographs of her crying in public, statements from neighbors about arguments overheard from the Davidson home, and medical records suggesting prenatal depression, Mrs. Davidson has refused psychiatric treatment recommended by her obstetrician, Kellerman continued. She has made wild accusations about an alleged affair between her husband and Mrs. and Sterling, accusations that have no basis in fact and appear to be symptoms of pregnancy-induced paranoia. Sarah felt physically sick as she watched her justified reactions to betrayal being reframed as evidence of mental illness. Every tear she had shed, every moment of vulnerability, every reasonable response to discovering her husband's infidelity was being used against her. But then Jenny rose to present their defense, and Sarah remembered why her sister was one of the most respected family attorneys in the state. Your Honor, what we're seeing here today is a carefully orchestrated campaign to gaslight a pregnant woman and steal her children. Mrs. Davidson's so-called paranoid accusations are actually well-documented facts. Jenny began presenting the evidence Sarah had gathered: credit card statements showing Michael's payments for hotel rooms, private investigator photographs of Michael and Becca together, phone records documenting the affair timeline. But more importantly, Your Honor, we need to examine the pattern of behavior exhibited by Rebecca Sterling, the woman at the center of this alleged friendship with Mr. Davidson. Jenny called Margaret Chen to the witness stand, and Sarah watched as her predecessor calmly and clearly described Rebecca's systematic destruction of her marriage to Michael 15 years earlier. She used the same tactics then that she's using now, Margaret testified, isolating the wife from her support system, encouraging the husband to document the wife's emotional responses to betrayal, positioning herself as the stable alternative to the unstable wife. Jenny then called Dr. Rodriguez, Sarah's therapist, who testified about the psychological abuse tactics known as triangulation and their effects on victims. Mrs. Davidson's responses to betrayal and manipulation are entirely normal and healthy, Dr. Rodriguez testified. Her decision to gather evidence rather than simply accepting her husband's denials shows clear thinking and appropriate self-protection instincts. But the most powerful testimony came from David Chen, Sarah's former boss, who spoke about her character and competence with conviction that filled the courtroom. I've worked with Sarah Davidson for 8 years, David testified. I've seen her handle crisis situations with grace, make difficult decisions under pressure, and consistently put the welfare of others before her own interests. The idea that this woman would harm her children or be unable to care for them is absurd. As the testimony continued, Sarah watched Judge Hendricks's expression gradually change from skepticism to interest to what looked like anger. When Jenny presented the evidence of Rebecca's pattern of targeting families, including Eleanor Wellington's tragic story, Judge Hendricks leaned forward intently. Mr. Kellerman, Judge Hendricks said during a brief recess, are you aware of Mrs. Sterling's history with previous marriages? Your Honor, Mrs. Sterling's past relationships have no bearing on this custody case. They have every bearing if they establish a pattern of behavior that directly relates to the current situation. I'm very troubled by what I'm hearing about systematic emotional abuse disguised as concern for Mrs. Davidson's welfare. When court resumed, Jenny played the recording Sarah had made of Becca's confession at the dinner table, followed by audio from the private investigator documenting Michael and Becca's planning conversations. The evidence was devastating. Even without Rebecca in the courtroom, her manipulation tactics were exposed in her own words and documented through her own actions. Your Honor, Jenny concluded, Mrs. Davidson is not an unstable mother having a breakdown. She's a woman who discovered her husband's years-long affair with her best friend and responded by methodically gathering evidence to protect herself and her children. Her emotional responses to betrayal are normal. Her decision-making has been rational and strategic, and her primary concern throughout this ordeal has been protecting her children from people who would harm them. Judge Hendricks called a 30-minute recess to review the evidence, and Sarah sat in the hallway holding James while Emma clung to her side. Emma had been brought to court as a potential witness, though Sarah prayed the judge wouldn't require an 8-year-old to testify about her father's betrayal. Mommy, are they going to take me away from you? Emma asked quietly. No, sweetheart, Sarah replied with more confidence than she felt. No one is going to take you away from me. When court resumed, Judge Hendricks looked directly at Michael before speaking. Mr. Davidson, I find the evidence presented by your wife to be compelling and disturbing. The documentation of your affair with Mrs. Sterling, combined with the testimony about Mrs. Sterling's history of targeting families, paints a picture of calculated deception rather than the mental health crisis you've alleged. Sarah felt her heart hammering as the judge continued. Furthermore, I'm troubled by the tactics used to undermine Mrs. Davidson's credibility. The blog post, the social media campaign, the attempts to reframe normal responses to betrayal as evidence of mental illness. These appear to be deliberate attempts to manipulate public opinion, and this court, Judge Hendricks turned to Sarah. Mrs. Davidson, I see no evidence that you pose any danger to your children. Your responses to discovering infidelity appear rational and protective. Your decision to gather evidence rather than simply accepting denial shows clear thinking. Sarah felt tears of relief beginning to flow as Judge Hendricks rendered her decision. Temporary custody will remain with Mrs. Davidson. Mr. Davidson will have supervised visitation rights pending the outcome of divorce proceedings, and I'm issuing a restraining order preventing Mrs. Sterling from having any contact with the minor children until this matter is fully resolved. As they left the courthouse, Sarah felt lighter than she had in months. Emma was skipping beside her, chattering excitedly about going home, while James slept peacefully in his carrier. What happens now? Sarah asked Jenny as they reached the car. Now you rebuild, Jenny replied. You've won this battle, but the war isn't over. Michael will appeal, and the divorce proceedings will be lengthy and expensive. But Sarah, you've proven something important today. You're not the victim Rebecca Sterling thought you were. That evening, Sarah sat in her living room nursing James while Emma did homework at the kitchen table. For the first time in months, the house felt like home instead of a battlefield. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you've won, but this isn't over. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Sarah looked at the message, then deleted it without responding. Rebecca Sterling had underestimated her opponent, and that mistake had cost her everything she had worked months to achieve. But Sarah knew the text was right about one thing. This wasn't over. Rebecca wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully, and desperate people were capable of desperate actions. As Sarah tucked Emma into bed that night, her daughter asked the question that had been weighing on both their minds. Mommy, is Daddy ever coming home? Sarah smoothed Emma's hair, choosing her words carefully. Daddy and I are getting divorced. Sweetheart, that means we won't be married anymore, and he won't live here with us. But he'll still be your daddy, and you'll still see him. What about Aunt Becca? Sarah's jaw tightened. Aunt Becca won't be part of our lives anymore. Sometimes adults make choices that hurt other people, and when that happens, we have to protect ourselves and the people we love. Emma nodded solemnly, processing this information with the resilience that children often show in the face of adult failures. I'm glad you're my mommy, Emma said quietly. I'm glad you're my daughter, Sarah replied, feeling her heart swell with love and determination. The heartbreaking family drama was far from over, but Sarah had won the most important battle, the right to protect and raise her children. Whatever came next, she would face it as a single mother who had learned to trust her own strength and refused to be destroyed by people who underestimated her. The pregnant wife betrayed had become something much more powerful, a mother who would fight any battle necessary to protect her family. 6 months after the custody hearing, Sarah Chen Davidson stood in her new home office, watching Emma play with baby James in the backyard garden. The modest 3-bedroom house was a far cry from the mansion she had shared with Michael. But it was theirs, purchased with money from her growing consulting business in the divorce settlement that had finally been finalized. The settlement had been less than Jenny had hoped for, but more than Sarah had feared. Michael had been forced to pay substantial alimony and child support, though his legal fees and the damage to his business reputation had left him significantly less wealthy than he had been a year ago. The tech industry was small and gossipy, and word of his affair and manipulation tactics had spread quickly through professional networks. Rebecca Sterling had disappeared from their lives as suddenly as she had entered them. The restraining order had been made permanent, and rumors suggested she had left the city entirely after several of her previous victims had filed civil suits against her for emotional distress and fraud. Sarah's consulting business, Second Chances Strategic Consulting, had grown beyond her wildest expectations. She specialized in helping women rebuild their professional lives after major life changes, divorce, widowhood, career interruptions. Her story had become known in certain circles, and women who had faced similar betrayals sought her out for both business advice and personal support. "Sarah, you have visitors," called Maria Santos, the part-time nanny Sarah had hired to help with James while she worked. Sarah looked up from her laptop to see two women standing at her front door, one holding a toddler, the other clutching a folder of papers. They had the haunted, desperate look Sarah remembered from her own darkest days. "Mrs. Davidson, my name is Jennifer Walsh. This is my friend Caroline Peters. We read about your case online, and we think the same woman who destroyed your marriage is working on ours." Sarah invited them in, settling them in her living room with coffee while Emma entertained the toddler. As Jennifer and Caroline told their stories, Sarah felt a familiar chill of recognition. "She calls herself Rachel Stone now," Jennifer explained. "She befriended me at my son's preschool, started having coffee dates, gradually became my closest confidant. Then she started suggesting that my husband seemed stressed, that maybe I wasn't supporting his career ambitions enough." Caroline nodded grimly. "She inserted herself into our marriage through my husband's work. She's a business consultant now, helping tech startups with marketing strategy. She convinced my husband that I was holding him back from achieving his full potential." Sarah looked at the photographs they had brought, candid shots of a woman with different hair color and style, but unmistakably the same person who had destroyed Eleanor Wellington's family and tried to steal Sarah's children. "How did you find each other?" Sarah asked. "Jennifer's private investigator found evidence that Rachel had targeted my family first," Caroline explained. "We started comparing notes and realized we were dealing with the same person, using the same playbook." Sarah felt a familiar surge of protective anger. Rebecca Sterling was still out there, still destroying families, still leaving traumatized children and broken women in her wake. "What do you want from me?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. "Help," Jennifer said simply. "You're the only person who's ever successfully fought her and won. We need to know how you did it." Over the next 2 hours, Sarah shared everything she had learned about Rebecca's tactics, the importance of documenting evidence, the need for professional support, and the strategy of connecting with other victims to establish a pattern of behavior. "But most importantly," Sarah concluded, "you have to remember that you're not fighting just for yourselves. You're fighting for your children, and for all the future families she'll target if she's not stopped." As Jennifer and Caroline prepared to leave, armed with contact information for Sarah's private investigator and therapist, Sarah felt a familiar sense of purpose. Her own battle with Rebecca was over, but the war against her destructive influence was far from finished. That evening, after Emma was in bed and James was sleeping peacefully in his crib, Sarah sat at her kitchen table reviewing the files Jennifer and Caroline had left behind. Rebecca's new identity was sophisticated, complete with professional credentials, social media presence, and carefully crafted personal history. She had learned from her previous exposure and become more careful about covering her tracks. Sarah was deep in thought when her phone rang. David Chen's name appeared on the screen. "Sarah, I hope it's not too late to call. I wanted to let you know about something that happened at work today." "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, hearing tension in David's voice. "A woman came to our office looking for you. She said she was an old friend from college, wanted to reconnect. She was very interested in your current situation, where you live now, how you're doing financially, whether you're dating anyone." Sarah's blood ran cold. What did she look like? Blonde, late 30s, very put together, designer clothes, expensive jewelry. She said her name was Rachel Stone. Sarah gripped the phone tighter. Rebecca had found her. After 6 months of carefully rebuilding her life, the predator was circling again. David, I need you to be very careful. That woman is dangerous. She's the person who destroyed my marriage, and she's been targeting other families since then. Don't give her any information about me or my business. Of course not. But Sarah, if she's dangerous, shouldn't you call the police? She hasn't actually done anything illegal yet. She's just gathering information. But David, I need you to document everything. What she looked like, what questions she asked, exactly what she said. And if she contacts you again, don't engage with her at all. After hanging up, Sarah sat in her quiet kitchen trying to process what Rebecca's reappearance might mean. Was she planning another attack on Sarah's life? Or was this just reconnaissance, making sure Sarah wasn't a threat to her new schemes? Sarah walked to her home office and pulled out a locked file cabinet where she kept copies of all the evidence from her divorce case, photos of Rebecca with her various identities, testimonies from her previous victims, documentation of her manipulation tactics. Sarah had been considering writing a book about her experience, but now she wondered if she needed to do something more immediate. Her laptop was still open, and on impulse, Sarah created a new document, the Rebecca Sterling Files. She titled it, A Warning to Future Victims. As she began typing, documenting everything she knew about Rebecca's methods and history, Sarah felt the familiar clarity that came with having a mission. She had rebuilt her own life, but that wasn't enough. As long as Rebecca Sterling was out there destroying families, no one was safe. The next morning, Sarah made a decision that would have seemed impossible during her darkest days of betrayal and gaslighting. She called Jenny. I want to sue Rebecca Sterling, Sarah announced. Civil suit for intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraud, interference with marriage, whatever charges we can make stick. Sarah, she's using a false identity and has probably moved to another state. It could be difficult and expensive to pursue. I don't care about the money, Sarah interrupted. I care about stopping her before she destroys more families. And I think I know how to find her. That afternoon, Sarah created a website, the Rebecca Sterling Warning Network. She posted photos of Rebecca under all her known identities, detailed descriptions of her tactics, and testimonies from her victims. She included resources for women who suspected they were being targeted and a confidential reporting system for new victims to come forward. Within 48 hours, Sarah had received dozens of emails from women who recognized Rebecca's photo or methods. Some were current victims asking for help. Others were past victims sharing their stories. And a few were professionals, therapists, lawyers, private investigators, who wanted to help build a case against her. But the most important email came from an unexpected source, Mrs. Davidson. My name is Detective Lisa Martinez with the Portland Police Department. We've been investigating a woman matching Rebecca Sterling's description in connection with the suspicious death of Eleanor Wellington. Your website has provided us with crucial information we've been missing. We need to talk. Sarah stared at the email, her heart racing. Eleanor Wellington's death had been ruled a suicide. But what if it hadn't been? What if Rebecca's manipulation had been even more sinister than anyone had realized? As Sarah prepared to call Detective Martinez, she glanced out her window at Emma and James playing in the garden. Her children were safe, her life was rebuilt, and her business was thriving. She could have simply enjoyed her hard-won peace and let someone else fight Rebecca Sterling. But as Sarah picked up the phone to call the detective, she knew she couldn't walk away. Too many families were at risk. Too many children could lose their mothers. Too many women could be gaslit into believing they were worthless. The pregnant wife betrayed had become something Rebecca Sterling had never anticipated, a determined adversary with nothing left to lose and everything to protect. Detective Martinez, this is Sarah Davidson. I think it's time we had a very long conversation about Rebecca Sterling. As Sarah began to recount her story to the police detective, she realized her journey was far from over. The heartbreaking family drama that had nearly destroyed her was about to become something much bigger, a fight for justice that could save countless other families from the predator who had targeted them all. In the garden, Emma called out. "Mommy, come play with us." Sarah looked at her children, her beautiful, safe, protected children, and smiled. "I'll be right there, sweetheart. Mommy just has one more important phone call to make." The final chapter of Sarah's story was really just the beginning of something larger, a battle that would determine whether women like Rebecca Sterling could continue destroying families with impunity, or whether their victims would finally find their voices and fight back together. Either way, Sarah Chen Davidson was no longer running from the fight, she was leading it.